some water?
Yes,
Yeah,
I
I'll
was just
get
thinking
two-
that.
I'll get
Thank
two
you.
glasses here. And I'll just, you can put yours there if you're comfortable, or I'll put it here. Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spokane, where our mission is to join together to create a nourishing, liberal religious home and to champion justice, diversity, and environmental stewardship in our wider world. Or as we say in short, and you're welcome to say it with me, to create community, find meaning, and work for justice. Welcome to one and all. It's great to have all of you with us today via our live stream. And I want to welcome all those who have been watching us, participating with us, I should say, since all of this began, as well as those of you who might be joining with us for the first time today. We're also glad to have you. And want to embrace everyone's fullness in this hour, all of your uniqueness, your unique beliefs and background and lifestyle and experiences and differences and everything that helps make you who you are is welcome here this morning. We had a wonderful unity rally in front of our church last night for some of our members who were able to attend, and I talked a little bit about unity and really realized how essential diversity is to unification. You know, throughout time, the universe itself has evolved as diverse things came together to form complex things. So from stardust that became, particles, and particles that became chemicals, and chemicals that became cells, and cells that became blobs, and blobs that joined together to become all sorts of living things with cells that had specialties and individual organisms coming together to form communities. And unity is complex, and it is composed of diversity. So all that makes you uniquely individual helps make us who we are together. Otherwise, we're a monoculture that is unhealthy. So thank you for bringing your diversity with you this morning to help us be a more complicated unity. I also want to thank Todd Milne once again, who's not only working our sound and audio-visual today, but also who has been providing our music for us. Todd, of course, is an extraordinary musician and worked with some extraordinary musicians and has been sharing his copyrighted music with us for free. So Tom, how could I get that wrong? Thank you. And I also want to welcome the return of our lay leaders, which we started last week under phase 2 of COVID restrictions. And today we have our friend and my dear friend Lisa Conger. So I want to welcome her and thank her for her participation in our service today, but also give her a couple of words here at the start of our service for a special announcement. So Lisa? We're going to push this down.
All right. Good morning. This week I will be reading medical-related poems on the Poetry Moment on KPBX 91.1 on your radio dial. I invite you to tune in and hear the winners of the Dr. William H. Green Poetry Prize, as well as 2 of Bill's poems. Bill Green and I co-facilitated a poetry group at Sacred Heart Hospital for a number of years, as well as taught together a course called Take 2 Poems and Call Me in the Morning, which was a class in medical humanities and reflective writing for first-year medical students. Bill was a member of our church's Word Garden Poets and a longtime member of the church's choir. His friends in the medical community and poetry circle established this prize in his honor, and it was open to area medical students or residents writing poems about aspects of medicine or healing. The program will be archived for later listening if you can't hear it at 9 o'clock, or you can listen at 9 each weekday morning on KPBX 91.1. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Appreciate that. Look forward to hearing more of your poetry. And what a way to honor Bill Green, who can't necessarily speak for himself these days, but he's still Bill, and his beautiful heart is still with us, so thank you. that's all the announcements I have for this morning, so why don't we go ahead and take some time to greet one another using your cell phones, email, a quick call, whatever it might be, to say hello to those that you've been missing and let them know that you're thinking of them at this time. Okay. As always, we'll have more opportunity to greet one another following our service or for the rest of the week. For that matter, you can always use your devices to connect with one another, and I hope you do. But we're going to move forward now by lighting our chalice, the symbol of our faith, the symbol of our unity and our solidarity, of our openness and our inclusion, of our community and our individual uniqueness. May this small flame be our offering of hope to those who are cold and alone, and a light to those in darkness. May it be a flame that ignites justice in our world and a beacon of hope to those in need, and may it reflect at least a spark of truth wherever truth has been lost, and cast a healthy shadow of doubt wherever it's been found.
Our opening words this morning is a poem by Stanley Kunitz, The Layers. I have walked through many lives, some of them my own, and I am not who I was, though some principle of being abides, from which I struggle not to stray. When I look behind, as I am compelled to look before I can gather strength to proceed on my journey, I see the milestones dwindling toward the horizon, and the slow fires trailing from the abandoned campsites, over which scavenger angels wheel on heavy wings. Oh, I have made myself a tribe out of my true affections, and my tribe is scattered. How shall the heart be reconciled to its feast of losses? In a rising wind, the manic dust of my friends, those who fell along the way, bitterly stings my face. Yet I turn, exulting somewhat with my will intact, to go wherever I need to go, and every stone on the road precious to me. In my darkest night, when the moon was covered and I roamed through the wreckage, a nimbus-clouded voice directed me. Live in the layers, not on the litter. Though I lack the art to decipher it, no doubt the next chapter in my book of transformations is already written.
Thank you, Lisa. We're now going to have our candles of care for those who are most on our hearts and minds this morning, and you can continue to light candles if you have them at home as well. And I hope you do, be they virtual candles or real candles or any kind of light you want. But with Lisa here, we're also going to be able to light our candles of care here in our sanctuary. So I want to begin with a candle for Sally LeCue, who is a friend of the congregation who actually has never attended our services in person here, but has always streamed with us because she lives far enough away that she has to. But Sally, it's been great having you with us, and I appreciate you reaching out for a candle of care. Sally is looking for a new place to live, and she's having a little bit of trouble finding a good place at this time, so she asked us to put some positive energy and prayer out to Sally LeCue, so please do so. And also a candle for Barry and Melanie Lubrick, who are members of our church who live down south these days in Arizona. But Barry has been dealing with cancer and was having a lot of trouble with his treatment, but good news is has been put on some new treatment and has actually been responding very well to it. So we want to keep them in our hearts and prayers and hope that things continue to go well for Barry. And then also a candle celebrating the 47th wedding anniversary of Dale and Nancy Avery, which occurred on June 9th. So congratulations to them. And also want to light a candle in general for the people of our country, the people of our world. But we've had another incident, as many of you may have seen in the news, in Atlanta yesterday involving the police shooting of an unarmed black man. And, I don't even know what to say, who to limit such a candle for, so I'm just going to light a candle this morning and go into a moment of silence, as always, and give you some time to ponder those that you're most thinking of at this time. Those named aloud and those embraced in our silence, and all those who are suffering in our world at this hour, we hold in our community with compassion. And now it is time for our story for all ages. And as usual, I recognize my weakness in storytelling, so I called Puppets for Hire this morning and asked them to send somebody over. So let's just see who has come today to help us out. Oh boy, it looks like one of my favorite characters. It is none other than Texas Jack. Texas Jack, it's great to see you. Well, howdy, partner. Howdy indeed. It's always great to have you back, Jack, and particularly all the way from Washington. I know Texas is a far trip for you. It must have been a hard trip. Like putting socks on a rooster, son. I spent a little bit of time in Texas myself. Where exactly is it that you're from? Oh, just some little old hole in the ground you likely never heard of. That's probably true. I'm guessing that it's a lot cooler here than it is in Texas right now. It's hotter there than a stolen tamale, son. I'll bet it is. That sounds pretty hot. Yeah, the hens are laying hard-boiled eggs. Yeah, sure they are. Well, what is it that brings you exactly to Washington today? Well, I'm searching everywhere, looking for the nursery magic fairy, so she can turn me into a toy, because I don't want to be real anymore. Well, I tell you, there's a whole lot wrong with what you just said, but let's go with it anyway. Why is it that you don't want to be real anymore? Because I'm no hat and no cattle, son. It just ain't right that I should be real if I ain't had all my hair loved off. If you haven't had all your hair loved off, are you referring to the story of the Velveteen Rabbit? You know it? Well, a little. Well, don't just stand there looking like your phone is off the hook. Remind everyone of what it's about. Okay, well, let's see if I recall. It begins with the child receiving a toy rabbit in a stocking one Christmas morning. That's it. And the child didn't think much of it at first and stuck it on a shelf right next to its worn-out leather horse, which was the oldest and wisest toy in the nursery. I love that horse. I'm sure you do. Well, one day the Velveteen Rabbit asked what it means to be real, and the skin horse said, it's a thing that happens to you when a child loves you for a long, long time. Not to just play with, but really loves you. Then you become real. Does it hurt? Asked the rabbit. And sometimes, the skin horse said, but when you're real, you don't mind being hurt. Does it happen all at once, like being wound up? He asked. Did I dit? Well, it doesn't happen all at once, said the skin horse. You become. It takes a long time. That's why it doesn't happen often to people who break easily or have sharp edges or who have to be carefully kept. Generally, by the time you're real, most of your hair has been loved off and your eyes drop out and you can get loose in the joints and very shabby. But things don't matter at all, because once you're real, you can't be ugly, except to people who don't understand. Then one day, sure enough, the nanny tucked the Velveteen Rabbit into the bed with the child, and it soon became the little one's favorite toy. And once the nanny put it away, while cleaning his room, the child cried out for it. All this fuss over a toy, she said. It's not a toy, the child said. It's real. That's right. The Velveteen Rabbit was very happy that the child loved it enough to finally make it real. So was very surprised when one day it met some other rabbits in the garden who said it wasn't really a real rabbit because it couldn't jump or dance or even move. They was meaner than a skillet full of rattlesnakes. They weren't very nice. But even worse than that is the child ended up getting so sick that once he got better, they had to burn all his clothes, including his bedding and, yes, his toys, to keep the germs from spreading again. This is the part that always gives me an achy, drakey heart. Well, it ends up okay, though, because the Velveteen Rabbit is outside in a pile of everything to be burned, and the nursery magic fairy comes. And the nursery magic fairy comes and says, I take care of all the playthings that the children have loved. When they are old and worn out and the children don't need them anymore, then I come and take them away with me and turn them into real. And that's what she did. She used her magic to make the velveteen rabbit real so it could really jump and dance and play with all the other rabbits and occasionally to wiggle its nose and say hi to the child who loved it. That's it. That's why I want the nursery magic fairy to make me a toy so I can have all my hair loved off and become really real. Well, I see, you don't have to be turned into a toy, though, to become real, Jack. I don't know. All you need to do is be appreciated and respected for who you really are. Love isn't what makes us real. It's not. Nope. Love just recognizes that we're already real. Love is treating others like they are real. Well, you said a mouthful, son. Yes, and I have a lot more to say today, so I better hop to it. Oh, boy. I'm going to act like the exorcist and get the devil out of here before you start talking my ears off. Okay, see you later, Jack. Thank you. Jack is a fun and funny character to have around. We are now going to have our meditation.
I invite you to join me now in a time of meditation with these words by the Reverend Sarah Stewart. Your sacredness does not rely on your doing. Your holiness comes from your being. You have been holy for your whole life, from when you were a helpless infant, and you will still be holy when you are elderly and infirm. Your being, not your doing, is sacred.
Since I'm going to be talking about my own evolution in just a bit, I thought I'd read from my newest book, Evolution's Way, just from the afterword, a bit from the afterword. I'm going to do about 4 paragraphs, a little bit more than usual. Whether we give it names like Prometheus, Apsu, or Nun, evolution has been a force Homo sapiens has recognized for thousands of years. Even after Darwin consigned this ancestral knowledge to the domain of science, it has not been content to remain so tightly confined. No more than information itself has been satisfied to remain cramped within our genes. Less than 100 years after Origins, Teilhard de Chardin began forecasting that evolution would eventually culminate in the convergence of human consciousness, which is not unlike Ray Kurzweil's more recent prediction that the entire universe is about to become saturated with our intelligence. For some people, these rapid changes seem terrifying, while others are enthusiastic about what they consider the most transformative period in human existence. Some caution it's warranted, some caution is warranted and will help us advance with fewer regrets, so long as we don't let our biological propensity toward fear prevent us from advancing at all. Not that fear can really halt this force of nature. Like Old Man River, it just keeps on rolling along. Whether we are going with the flow or are terrified by the rapids we encounter ultimately makes no difference. The times they are a-changin', to cite another song with or without permission. Yet if we are at one with this force, if we are at peace with evolution's way, we can foresee where it's taking us and use the adaptive abilities it empowers us with to help shape the future we want. It doesn't have to be the dystopian future many of us dread, nor is it going to be everything others hope for. Once realized, our utopian dreams are never the perfect worlds we imagine. They still have many challenges, but they are still better worlds than most ever believed. For the past 13.7 billion years, the known universe has been moving down a path toward exponentially higher states of complexity, consciousness, and unity. This long path has become clear in hindsight and now appears much shorter as we turn toward tomorrow and see it passing right before our astonished eyes. It astonishes us because it is our impending destiny, a destiny based upon the economics of human welfare and growth, a destiny without poverty, hunger, or discrimination, a destiny without the three kinds of suffering even the Buddha learned to live with: old age, disease, and death, a destiny in which we all live in peace as one community on a healthy planet, even as others are at home on other planets or inside floating space cities. A destiny in which each of us awakens every day to determine what we will do to make the world, nay, the whole universe, a better place. That's the path we're on. That's our trajectory. That's evolution's way. Todd, thank you so much for that. We've been listening to your music for weeks now, and every week it seems like there's something uniquely different about the variety. You're incredibly talented. Thank you. So this sermon is entitled Personal Evolutions. And a friend sent me an email this past week that included a brief comment stated by a delegate at the 1961 General Assembly in Boston regarding what was then the proposed association of Unitarianism and Universalism. Here's the statement. When there is decay, there is merger. When there's energy, there's schism. In opposition to the formation of the Unitarian Universalist Association, like a good Unitarian, the delegate was using an analogy from science. For instance, two stars locked together in orbit accelerates their decay and causes them to combine in the process. In her 2014 book on the subject, Dutch scientist Christina Korntreff explains, binary systems processed by the gas-induced orbital decay are more likely to merge. This is also true on the microscopic level. Fungus, for example, causes wood to rot by creating cavities in it. And as the rate of decay increases, those cavities merge together. The more they merge, the faster the wood breaks down. And the converse is also true. Energy causes things to break up. When particles are heated, for example, they gain energy and in the process expand and vibrate, causing them to break free of their surrounding structures. And this is where our own resident physicist, Bob Cook, gets at when he so often says, no friction, no motion. Always comes up and says, remember that, boy. No friction, no motion. Appreciate it, Bob. This is so because friction causes heat, as we all know. Heat causes energy. Energy makes things grow or expand and then become more independent. So when there is decay, there is merger. When there's energy, there's schism. This reminds me of another saying by Master Morihei Ueshiba, the founder of Aikido, the way of harmony. He says, life is growth. If we stop growing, technically and spiritually, we're as good as dead. The point I'm making is that we have to keep growing because the alternative is death and decay. You can't step into the same river twice, Heraclitus said, because everything is always changing. Staying the same, becoming the same, means death. Homogeneity means boredom. Equilibrium means game over. All things seek states of equilibrium, it's true, but it is the collision of opposites in that process that leads to change, diversity, life, growth. Cold and hot don't simply merge to become cool and warm. They clash, causing wind, rain, thunder, and lightning, energy in the process. Mountains are hewn and valleys forged by the clash of opposing tectonic forces. Life evolves only by facing adversity. Erich Fromm says, the duty to be alive is the same as the duty to become one's self. Yet he also says that we all die before we are ever truly born because we have the potential to keep evolving right up to our very last breath. Only in death do we stop growing, or at least death should be the only time we stop growing. Rigidity is a mark of morbidity, But it's possible to resist growing and changing while we're alive by letting spiritual and emotional and intellectual rigidity set in, becoming set or frozen in our ways. Of course, there are some who consider change a sin, if not a crime. We're not only expected not to change as individuals, but to hold the very same habits and ideologies held and practiced by our dead ancestors. This is the way to assure our societies remain the same, which can lead to decay and death because they cannot adapt to unexpected changes in the environment. Life is growth. If we stop growing technically and spiritually, we're as good as dead, which is true for societies, communities, organizations, as well as it is for individuals. As far as I'm concerned, this is all good. I'd hate to be the same person that I was 40 or 20 or even 10 years ago. Thank goodness that we can all learn from our mistakes, grow beyond them, and not be defined by them. How rewarding it is to discover new ideas and beneficial to discard those that no longer work for us or were wrong to begin with. Who wants to live according to untruths? Not me. Maybe we can't teach an old dog a new trick, but thanks to the enduring neuroplasticity of the human brain, we can change our minds and learn new tricks throughout our lives. Change isn't an insult, it's life. Otherwise, we're like all those useless zombie cells in our body that can't reproduce but don't die or go away, causing all kinds of inflammation that leads to our aging and to illness, or in scientific terms, to decay. Life is growth, and if we're not growing, we're as good as dead. In 2 weeks, it will be exactly 9 years since I started as your minister. And I like to think I've evolved in many ways since then. Perhaps there are some things about one's character that remain fundamentally unchanged, but our mindset, ethics, beliefs, knowledge, passions, interests, friendships, and so much else continue to evolve if the gravitational pull towards sameness hasn't caused us to enter into a life of decay and spiritual death. As I examine my own life, I recognize a lot of significant changes over the past decade, or near decade. I was 48 years old back then, and could still see perfectly well without glasses. Shortly after my arrival, however, I began experiencing these weird headaches and pressure and lightheadedness. My doctors couldn't figure out what was happening after months of trying, but at least ruled out anything serious. I finally discovered on my own that the cause was my weakening eyes and the constant strain of trying to keep things in focus. So I went immediately from wearing no glasses for my entire life to blended trifocals. And today, I can't see anything clearly without them. And that's not evolution, but it shows how much things can change in just a very short time, and may be a metaphor of how my world view has continued to change since then, too. It was also about that time that a philosophical change in my mindset began to sink in. I came here right after contemplating, or completing, I should say, my dissertation. In fact, I gave its defense over the phone while I was candidating here as your minister. There was a lot I learned while writing and researching my dissertation, which was on the psychology of religion. But one of the things that most impacted me was discovering that extreme fear and paranoia is a characteristic of the fundamentalist or extremist mindset, which I consider a mental disorder because it has all the earmarks of fixation, of being stuck at the earliest stages of development, that is. As individuals, paranoia is often a symptom of schizophrenia and other disorders, but many individuals who don't suffer from diagnosable disorders also easily succumb to paranoid conspiracy theories. When they gravitate towards others who share this tendency, together they reinforce their exaggerated and unfounded fears by becoming extremist groups. In fundamentalism, this is called apocalypticism, collectively exaggerating their fears to such an extreme that they believe the whole world is coming to an end. And this is why another characteristic of the fundamentalist mindset is charismatic leadership, though the leader is just as paranoid as everyone else. As stated in Charles Strozier's book on the subject, the leaders exert a powerful influence by expressing ideas with assured, intense conviction. At the same time, most charismatic leaders are psychologically paranoid, which is the source of the certainty with which they speak. That's the rigidity playing out again. Intellectual rigor mortis. Ideological decay as the individuals involved gravitate towards groupthink. This tendency to inflate our fears to paranoid and apocalyptic proportions, which becomes dangerous when enforced by groups, also gets projected outwards. So the paranoid group obsesses about the danger and inherent evil of outsiders, which explains the demonization of liberals, the criminalization of black persons, the hatred and suspicion of Jews or gays or immigrants or Muslims, and so on. Of course, it's not just religious fundamentalists who give into their fears to such extremes. Humans by nature are wired for fear. It's a great survival mechanism, which is why liberals can as easily project our fears and subsequent hostilities onto others too. Capitalists, billionaires, conservatives, Republicans, white straight males, fundamentalists, and so on. As all of this began to sink in about the same time I was arriving as your minister, it caused me to consider how much I engaged in such thinking, how often I've exaggerated my own fears and projected them onto others. The problem with projecting what's really inside us onto others is that we then can't see who they really are. It's extremely disrespectful. And that's the word, because respect, you'll remember, has the root meaning to see, which is what respecting someone is, seeing them for who they truly are beneath the surface of our projections, first impressions, and prejudices. When we take a superficial look at someone who is wealthy, or conservative, or male, or whatever, and think we've seen all we need to know, then we aren't really seeing reality. We're projecting a delusion and violating our first principle in the process, respecting the worth and dignity of every person. This point hit home for me several years ago when I was among a group from the Spokane Alliance who'd been invited to our previous mayor's office to discuss what we thought were concerns about his proposed budget. It turns out that he was extremely upset about what some of us had said about him while testifying during a recent city council meeting on the same matter. He was even prepared to play video of our remarks, which he decided not to. I couldn't exactly recall what I had said, but could tell that he took whatever was bothering him very personally, and even remarked about how painful it had been for his spouse to hear such things said about her husband, about the man she loves. In that moment, I felt such empathy for him and some guilt that I vowed to do my best to make sure my public remarks about others are not personal, that I state my honest disagreements, but do so in ways that don't violate our first UU principle requiring us to respect, that is, to see the humanity and the worth of others. It's not been easy, especially with you-know-who in office. But it is an aspiration and discipline worth striving for. So I try to remember my projections are shallow and superficial lies that deceive me and hurt others. Real people are complicated and multidimensional. It's my job to remember this and to know there's something much greater beneath the surface, even if I can't see it. This is why I don't participate in protests that are against people whom I disagree with, who come to our community, like Rick Santorum, Condoleezza Rice, or even Donald Trump have in the past. Although I do think I took a selfie in front of the baby Trump balloon when it was here, so nobody's perfect. Instead of protesting people, which our first principle discourages us against, I'm willing to counter-demonstrate. To me, this means rather than protesting someone's presence, which is to deny their right to travel and speak, if not to even exist, I should demonstrate how my values and ideas differ or are better. So even events meant to respond to the presence of those we disagree with shouldn't be about their presence among us. Banishing people and forbidding the expression of their speech and ideas is primitive and oppressive behavior. It's not liberal behavior by any means. I should know, as someone who's just been excommunicated from the UU Order of Ministers for writing a book. Instead, we should just speak for ourselves, uplifting our values and ways by demonstrating and stating why we believe them to be better. This is precisely what we did when Rick Santorum came here to speak against marriage equality many years ago. Instead of protesting his presence, by my urging, a group of faith leaders formed from our community originated the People of Faith Support Marriage Equality campaign, demonstrating our values instead, which proved extremely successful, as you know. I was fortunate a year or so after I arrived to also stumble upon Peter Diamandis' and Stephen Kotler's new book, Abundance, The Future is Better Than You Think, which contributed to my evolution by additionally showing me how my own tendency towards fearfulness causes me to see things as much worse than they really are. They explain that we have difficulty being optimistic about the future because our brains are hardwired to see the negative, especially when coping with the unknown and uncertainty. Uncertainty about what's out there gets filtered through the amygdala, the part of our brain, they remind us, is responsible for primal emotions like rage, hate, and fear. Yes, our brain actually has a special place for fear that feeds directly into our emotional processor, the hippocampus. When it comes to questions of our survival in particular, they say the amygdala becomes hypervigilant and causes us to see things from a negative perspective that only fears the worst. We are neurologically hardwired to be afraid. A short time later, I discovered a relatively new area of evolutionary psychology called ETAS theory. This stands for Evolutionary Threat Assessment Systems Theory. Evolutionary psychology considers human behavior in light of how it may have benefited our species' survival over time. ETS, again, Evolutionary Threat Assessment Systems, cognitive therapist Paul Gilbert succinctly explains, means the most important question faced every day by all animals, including humans, is whether their immediate environment is dangerous or not. In other words, the first thing we do in any situation, any new situation, is determine whether we are safe or not. New experiences, environments naturally make us feel a little anxious. Under normal circumstances, we become calm once we've assessed the situation and determined that there are no immediate threats. But those who have had a lot of insecurity in their lives can especially have trouble ever truly calming down. Living in a constant state of fear can lead to all kinds of illnesses, in addition to a false and negative perception of the world. Prior to this, a lot of my ministry was based on such fear, on finding the evil enemy, even if it was only an evil ideology. As a philosopher who was trained to ask questions, the main question beneath most of my questions was, what's wrong with this? Why shouldn't I believe it? It impacted how I saw the world and others, causing a degree of mistrust. And after realizing how both my neurology and education have contributed to my negative perceptions, I worked to see past these biases. And I am happy to say have become a much more optimistic person about our future and about human nature. Now I tend to see the innate goodness in human nature rather than the pessimistic view there's something essentially wrong with all of us because we are human. I don't have a negative view of human nature anymore. It's made my experience of life much richer and happier, even though I've noticed it hasn't always been so well received by everyone in my liberal community. People especially enjoy hearing sermons about how we're right and others are wrong. We like knowing what the dangers are out there so we can avoid them, and we like feeling superior and heroic. We enjoy seeing ourselves as the good guys. So sermons pointing out what's wrong with the world and with others meet a lot of psychological needs when it comes to coping with our amygdala-driven fears and tendency towards suspicion, paranoia, and groupthink. Everyone being on the same page and having a common enemy and an ideology that can fix it all makes us feel like we are in control and thus safe. My sermons don't facilitate this nearly as much as they used to. All of this has synthesized another change in my development. I no longer consider myself a dragon slayer. What I mean by this is that I'm no longer on a psychological hero's journey. As a younger man, I was keen on figuring out what's wrong with the world and fixing its problems, ideologically speaking. In a chaotic world full of evils, it made me feel good about myself. Of course, part of being young is about being idealistic. We want to figure things out for ourselves, to solve the world's problems, to find the surest way, and to see ourselves as the heroes of our emerging story. That's natural. We should do that. It's part of our process. The problem is, being a hero means slaying an enemy or toppling a giant, even if in reality, like the delusional Don Quixote, we're only tilting at windmills. Worse, sometimes the windmills we attack are real people who are far more complicated than our paranoid projections. When I get in such a mood, I try to think about all the youthful idealists who greeted their young counterparts returning from Vietnam by shouting at and spitting on them. Their rage against the war was projected onto other children who had been forcibly taken from their homes and placed in a dangerous foreign country where they had to kill or be killed. Those kids couldn't wait to get home, and were lucky if they did. only to be the receptacles of collective outrage. My guess is that a lot of those understandably outraged young idealists grew to regret targeting those returning soldiers. My hope is to have fewer such regrets in my future by not tilting at real people I mistake for windmills. So I'm off the hero's journey, and I'm no longer in the dragon-slaying business. This doesn't mean that I don't still fight my battles. I do, just as I have in the past. As much as I've evolved, my values haven't changed much. I still believe deeply in reason, in freedom of conscience, and in the humanistic ethic that seeks human welfare and individual unfolding for everyone, which is why I chose the Unitarian Universalist religion. My ethics have evolved only inasmuch as I have become more devoted to these principles. In the past, I considered myself more an ethical consequentialist, meaning that I determined right and wrong based on their outcomes, not their means. Sticking just to the means often hurts a lot of people in the end, which is why civil disobedience is sometimes necessary, as it is today, by all means. But nowadays, I'm more value-driven. Influenced by Stoicism, I agree that our values must be lived out in every situation, regardless of the consequences to our own lives, whether others appreciate what we do or hate it. The Stoics tell us all else is indifferent, including pain and pleasure. So I remain devoted to reason, that is, to basing my beliefs on empirical evidence and facts, even in a postmodern world that has foregone all objectivity. Then using reason as best I can to objectively interpret their meaning. And to freedom of conscience, by which I mean preserving the fundamental right of everyone, friend or foe, to speak their minds without fear of punishment or being demonized, and I will even stand against my own friends and peers to do so. Finally, the humanistic ethic, which again says the sole purpose of everything that we do socially and politically must be for advancing human welfare and individual unfolding. So yes, I've changed a lot over the years. Unless I choose death, or worse, becoming a zombie among the living dead, I really can't help myself. I'm not sure where the road ahead will lead me from here, but I remain excited about all the possibilities before me in continuing to evolve and to grow. How about you?
Our benediction is this wisdom from poet Wendell Berry, Our Real Work by Wendell Berry. It may be that when we no longer know what to do, we have come to our real work, and that when we no longer know which way to go, we have come to our real journey. The mind that is not baffled is not employed. The impeded stream is the one that sings. Amen, blessed be, salam alaikum, and shalom.